when asking employees what would attract you to work with a particular business or what would keep you working with a business, one of the big ticket items we see is flexibility, flexible work practices.
Welcome to Health Practice Insights. I'm Wallace Long. My guest today is Cecilia White, Human Resources Consultant and Director at Perks People Solutions. Perks People Solutions is a leading provider of outsourced HR and recruitment services. Cecilia White has 25 years' experience in human resources and employment law. In our conversation, Cecilia shares the HR challenges she's seeing within the health sector. Cecilia provides an update on the changes in workplace relations and workplace law. She talks about the changing expectations of new and existing staff, sharing strategies to address these, and how also to become an employer of choice. We talk culture, values, leadership, and the benefit of having a sound set of HR policies. This episode is packed with practical information. Think you'll enjoy it. I need to let you know this podcast is for informational purposes only, and the views expressed are those of the hosts and guests and do not constitute professional advice, and we make no representations or warranties regarding the accuracy, completeness or applicability of the content, and you should consult your professional advisors for specific advice relating to your situation. Cecilia White, welcome to Health Practice Insights.
Thanks, Wallace, for having me.
What are the challenges that businesses are facing today?
We're certainly seeing a talent or skill shortage at the moment in a number of sectors, a number of industries. So finding good people, high quality talent for businesses has become harder and more challenging across the board. So that's probably a key challenge that we hear from our clients, our partners and people in the industries. Increased pressure on salaries, remuneration. So I think with cost of living pressures, housing affordability pressures, we're certainly seeing higher demand for higher salaries than we've ever really seen before, particularly early career professionals. So there's been a real shift, I think, in terms of the expectations of early career graduates, professionals coming in and commanding fairly high salaries from the outset. So that's created some challenges, I think, for a lot of businesses in a range of industries. Probably the other conversations that we're having frequently with business owners is the increasingly complex landscape around workplace relations and workplace law. So the compliance obligations around HR and just general workplace compliance have really increased, and they've really upped the ante for employers in the last couple of years. And in the last 2 years, we've seen a number of really quite significant changes in the workplace relations landscape. For example, the introduction of the new psychosocial hazard laws, which no doubt you've heard of. What that does is create another whole set of obligations for employers to ensure the psychosocial safety of their employees and their workplaces. So employers wrapping their heads around that and understanding what does that mean for them, what can they do and what should they do in their businesses, what does that look like for their industry. So we're doing a lot of work in that space as well. And probably one of the other main changes in that workplace legislation area would be the changes to sexual harassment laws as well, very much a sign of where we are as a society and expectations about respect in the workplace and inclusion and safety in the workplace. The sexual harassment laws have now extra obligations again for employers to create safe, harassment-free environments. So again, understanding whether I'm a small business owner, medium business owner or a large business owner, what does that look like for me and what do I need to do, and trying to understand and keep up with the regulations and with the requirements there. Everyone would be aware of, I guess, the modern award system in Australia. That is also something that is becoming increasingly complex, particularly around entitlements, pay rates. We hear so many cases, a lot of media around even the largest of businesses who get it wrong. Incorrect interpretation of awards, incorrect rates being applied, underpayments of overtime and penalty rates, it's really easy to get it wrong because the awards are so complex. And so we're constantly working to support employers to understand, again, what their requirements are, ensure they're compliant, ensure they're not falling short of those requirements. That's a constant learning curve, I think, for a lot of business owners, particularly small business owners as they grow and getting their heads around the complexity of the award structures. There's also, I guess, pairing back to that point I mentioned before about the psychosocial hazards and the sexual harassment laws, where we've seen really quite seismic shifts in employer obligations. Both Fair Work Australia and Safe Work SA, for those here in South Australia, but also their equivalents or counterparts across other states, are extra resourced now to conduct audits, random audits, investigations. They can initiate investigations in particular industries, sectors or particular workplaces where they will come on site effectively and want to see evidence that employers are complying with those psychosocial hazard laws or with the sexual harassment laws. So really seeing, again, more activity in that regulatory environment, which is then just another thing for business owners to try and manage, keep up with and stay ahead of the curve, really.
If we look back 5 years ago, these weren't as significant issues for businesses.
They weren't. Significant issues in the sense that there were some laws that did govern sexual harassment and safety in the workplace, but it's an extra layer now of compliance required, and it's an extra set of obligations in the sense that it's not enough now for employers to just react and respond well to an incident or an issue. These laws create obligations for them to actually proactively take preventative steps and preventative measures to ensure that these sorts of behaviours aren't happening to begin with, or ensuring that they're taking all reasonable steps to create a safe work environment. So it certainly has lifted it's up the ante for employers from where we were 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago.
And that applies to small and large businesses?
That's right. There's differences around when we're just talking about, what are reasonable steps? If the laws say, you're required to take reasonable steps, reasonable measures, what's reasonable for a small business will be very different to what's reasonable for a very large corporate employer. So there's recognition of resources, in-house expertise or otherwise. But no matter what size the business, there is some level of obligation to take proactive preventative steps in that safety area.
Are there any specific issues to the health sector that they're facing?
I think the shortage of good people, that's partly arising from the brain drain, professionals leaving South Australia either to go to Eastern Seaboard or overseas. So there's, now that things are a lot more mobile than they were 5 years ago when we were all very confined to our cities and our states for obvious reasons, the world's opened up again. People are a lot more mobile and exploring those opportunities to go elsewhere, particularly early career professionals. So I think that probably is fairly pertinent for the medical or health sector. I think the salary demands as well, not unique too, but there are particularly, I guess, unique challenges for the health sector when it comes to trying to compete perhaps with eastern state salaries or trying to compete with public sector health practice and salaries and benefits, etc., offered there. How do they remain competitive? But even just accessing data, salary data, in order to benchmark salaries can be really hard. How do you find that data? How reliable is it? Where do you source good quality salary benchmark data from specifically for the health industry? It can be tricky to locate and collate that in order to gauge where you're at in your business in terms of how competitive your salaries are.
Is there anything else within the health sector which is not necessarily unique, but something which health professionals are probably seeing at the moment?
I think the risk of burnout, is something that's really pertinent for the health sector. So the World Health Organization actually recognised occupational burnout as a syndrome a few years ago. So we know now that burnout is a really pressing issue for a range of industries, but if you think of the particular challenges in the health sector, the hours that are worked, the highly stressful environments in which they work, the pressure that they're working on under, the stakes are high, with the work that they are doing. They're all the ingredients that are there for a risk of burnout. And we also know from various studies, including one from APRA recently, that burnout was named as one of the main reasons why health practitioners would consider leaving the profession. So it's the hours, the pressure, the environment. It's a tough gig for a lot of people, and it's a challenge for employers to strike the balance between good patient outcomes and ensuring a good service for patients, but also ensuring their people aren't burning out.
I'd like to explore what good health businesses are doing to address these challenges relating to staff, existing staff and acquiring staff, so they can be an employer of choice.
So one of the big ticket items when asking employees what would attract you to work with a particular business or what would keep you working with a business, one of the big ticket items we see is flexibility, flexible work practices. We know now that flexible work isn't considered to be a privilege, or it's not just something that really progressive organisations are doing. It is an expectation now of employees of all age groups, but I think particularly younger and emerging professionals will be expecting that they can work flexibly, that they can maintain a healthy work-life balance. It can be a range of things that can be looked at to achieve that flexibility. It could be, for example, initiatives like a 4-day working week, which doesn't necessarily just mean cramming 5 days worth of work into 4 days and then having a Friday off. A 4-day work week is more about productivity first, and then the byproduct of it is a wellbeing result. So if you look at it as a 4-day working week, we're going to reduce our hours across the week. So whether that's having a full day off or whether you just work flexibly, but so you are working reduced hours, but with the same output. So the expectation is, yes, you can work the 4 days equivalent, but with the same output and on the same salary. So you're not taking a pay cut. The key is that output. So in order to achieve that, you have to look at your work design. You have to look at your efficiencies. You have to look at your productivity and how you are working. And if you can get that right in the 4 days or equivalent, everyone's winning. The business is still getting the output that they need. The patients are still getting the care that they need. You're still providing the services that need to be provided, but you're mitigating that risk of burnout by allowing people to work reduced hours. So that's a great initiative. There's some excellent work and studies being done in the States, in the nursing world, where they've trialled it over there. So there's some really good examples of how that's being done in quite an innovative way. Simple things, like if you're a smaller practice, for example, the 4-day working week, it's just operationally going to be difficult. Flexible start and finish times, that can make a real difference for somebody who has caring responsibilities, for example. The pressures on people have changed now. They have. Most families are dual income families. Most of the time you have both parents, for example, working, and often they're both working full time. So allowing an employee in that situation flexibility to start a bit later, finish earlier, or vice versa, can really create a greater sense of well-being, a sense of balance, and ultimately they're going to be more inclined to stay working for that business because they're seen as being valued. And that flexibility is a sign of we value you, we trust you to get your work done. We're happy to adjust the timing to provide you with that balance. Other simple things, allowing employees additional leave, whether that's funded by the employer. It might be an extra day or 2 or 3 a year. It could be an extra week, for more generous employers. But again, that can make a real difference for people, particularly with caring responsibilities during school holidays, for example. Or it could be the ability to purchase extra leave. So you essentially salary sacrifice part of your salary in order to have an extra week or two, whatever it might be, of leave a year. And then finally, work from home. It's not possible in every single role, in every single organisation, but technology is a wonderful thing, and there are so many roles that can be done at least partly on a work from home basis or flexibly on a work from home basis. And I know there's been a lot of talk about return to office, return to workplaces, and swinging it back from where it was 5 years ago during COVID. But there's still, I think, a lot of benefit in maintaining a level of work from home practice in your business where you can and where it works. People do really value that. We know that.
What else is there from the ownership of practice that they can do?
Really competent, confident leaders where they're supported in their development as leaders. You're investing in their development so that they have the ability to really manage their people well, motivate staff, keep staff engaged, look at all of these sorts of things, different practices to keep people engaged, look at flexible work. If you're investing in leaders and giving them the ability and empowering them to do that and supporting them to do that, that's what will make the difference culturally, I think, in a business between, is this somewhere that I can see myself still working in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, or is this just really a business where I think this isn't for me and I'm not confident in the leadership. I'm not seeing that those initiatives being driven by strong leaders. So I think that's investing in your leaders and ensuring that they're doing the best that they can do to lead and to drive culture.
How would you define culture?
It's that DNA of an organisation, so the unspoken nature of the environment that people work in. And culture is something that takes a long time to build, and you do have to put conscious effort into building culture. It won't just happen organically. Leaders will drive the culture 100%. So if your leaders are behaving a certain way, if they are inclusive, if they are emotionally intelligent, if they are professional, that will drive the culture. So again, getting that leadership right is critical. The culture, in terms of building the culture, how do you do it? Looking for opportunities to bring people together, I think that's really key. Whether it's informal, social type activities, whether it's more days where there's discussions about the business, people have an opportunity to be heard or contribute to the vision of the business, the strategic direction of the business. What's really important for culture is where people feel heard. So what opportunities are you providing for your people to be heard on all manner of things? Do they have the ability, do they feel safe and confident to speak out or call out things that are bothering them, that they're not happy with? What mechanisms have you got in place for that? That's a really key part of a positive workplace culture. I'm a massive advocate for diversity and what that can do for culture. I think organisations that lack diversity, which are very homogenous, there's that groupthink phenomenon that happens. Those workplace cultures will be less positive, less motivating, less attractive to a whole range of people than a culture that really values and embraces differences of opinion, different backgrounds, different ages, all of the different types of diversity. That's what creates a really rich, welcoming culture, I think. We do work with a lot of businesses who identify that they need more diversity in their business. How do we go about that? How do we make sure we are an inclusive culture as well?
And I suppose anything you put in place today is going to be beneficial for those that are currently in the health practice, but also for many years to come.
Most definitely. You're planting trees really for the future by putting these foundational pieces in place, building that culture from the ground up and weaving it in, weaving positive culture and the values of your organisation into every part of how you run your business. That's how you get the longevity, and that's how you'll ensure that that culture will carry through regardless of changes in personnel, because that's where the risk is. If you have those changes, new people come in, it's really important that the culture is solid, the values are solid, and that you're recruiting for that values fit and that culture fit as well as just skill. Working with organisations to develop up their values is really rewarding and really, really interesting work. We love going into different organisations, businesses, small, medium, large, and working collaboratively with their leaders but also with their teams to collectively and, co-design a really good solid set of values. What are we about here? What is our DNA? What are the non-negotiable behaviours? What do we want to be known for? Working with organisations to build those values is fantastic, because they then become such an important tool for a whole range of things, right through from hiring to performance reviews, building people's job descriptions, workforce planning. There are so many areas where you can take and grasp hold of your values and really weave them into all different parts of your business and your strategy.
If they wanted to become an employer of choice, where do they get started?
Putting together what we would call your value proposition, your employee value proposition. It's almost like a branding exercise. What's your point of difference? What are you offering in your business which is attractive, might be different to what other practices are offering? So you would map out, what are you doing in terms of your culture? Describing your culture and understanding your culture and how to promote that as a positive aspect of coming to work for the business. Looking at your compensation, obviously, your remuneration structures that we talked about before. So doing that salary benchmarking can be useful to understand where you sit in the market, and can that be presented as, again, an attractive proposition for a potential employee. Another area is, I guess it's linked to culture, but the flexible work. I just think that's such a key piece of your value proposition, keeping up with the expectations that people have around flexible work. So looking at what you've got in place or what you could put in place to be competitive there. The other aspect is career development and professional development for people coming in. What sort of pathway is available for them if they were to join your practice? What does that pathway look like? What are the opportunities? How are you going to be investing in them and their growth and their development? Such an important part of what people are looking for in their work experience and in their work life. Understanding what you can do, depending on the size of your business, what you can do and what you can offer in that space is, I think, also really critical.
Is there anything else on top of the value proposition and the culture and the flexible work?
Sure. So I think once you've established what your value proposition is, the other complementary part to that is making sure you've got really good, solid policies in your business, HR policies, which support and align with those aspects, because that in itself is indicative that an employer is an employer of choice. They've got it together. They've got good foundations. They value their people by having really clear policies and guidelines and expectations in place. If I'm a new employee or I'm a candidate or I'm applying for a role and the contract that I get sent as the offer is professional and compliant and clear, that is going to be a much more attractive proposition than getting a contract which looks pretty deficient and non-compliant or not contemporary. So making sure those foundations are in place. It might seem a bit dry and a bit compliance-based, but it will actually help you attract good quality professionals because they will value that. Asking your team what would be valuable to them rather than making the assumption And that can be done in a number of ways. You can run a fairly simple survey. You can have one-on-one conversations, a bit of a listening tour, if you like, by a leader in the organisation to establish what people are looking for. And that can really help inform what your particular initiatives will be. You can present a range of options. Here are some things that we're thinking of putting in place as a business. What do people think? Put it out for a bit of a poll or a bit of a vote. That's a good way of getting people's buy-in into some of those strategies. So that's a nice way to start in a fairly sort of collaborative way. Another really important part of all of this, whether it's flexible work practices or any initiative, I think, that you're putting in place as a business, it's really important to have a good clear policy or guideline around, well, what is that? Once you land on what that initiative looks like for your business, making sure that's documented really well so that it's really clear, there's no confusion about what's in, what's out, what this looks like, what this doesn't look like. That's also really important. It's policies and procedures, I think, in any workplace are really, really important from the outset. From that, even a very small business, I would always recommend, just a small bundle at least of good quality HR policies, and the flexible work policy might be one of them, for example.
And if they are a small practice, what are their options?
There's a lot of helpful content available for employers on the Fair Work Australia or Fair Work Ombudsman website. Lots of templates, guidelines, fact sheets, some good helpful general information there. Obviously it's not tailored, but it is useful. For organisations who are a member of an employer association or some sort of industry organisation or peak body, there's information that's available specific for the sector or the industry through those organisations as well, or other business associations or business groups that those practices might be members of. It's also a great thing to talk to peers and colleagues who are also in the industry, see what they're doing, what have they tried, if there's any sharing of information that can be done there. A lot of our clients work quite collaboratively together to share information and resources as well.
Cecilia, can you tell us how the team at Perks People Solutions assist healthcare professionals and their businesses?
We provide outsourced HR support. So for organisations who don't necessarily have their own in-house HR expertise, but they're at a size where they need advice or guidance or support in relation to their HR function, then we can come in and provide that support in a whole range of ways, from the compliance aspect, policies, procedures, contracts, through to just general day-to-day management of people, whether that be performance related, if it's relationship, conflict in the workplace. We also can support with learning and development. We run a lot of different training development courses for different businesses, particularly in the health sector as well. We can certainly help with the sticky issues or the tricky issues where there might be a need for some technical advice or support around a particularly difficult situation. We've got that expertise in-house that we can provide good, pragmatic, commercial, compliant advice when it comes to managing staff in those more difficult situations. So it's a pretty broad service. We like to really partner with business owners to help them create the best work environments that they can. And sometimes they just need a bit of help to do that.
Cecilia, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks, Wallace.
A big thanks to Cecilia White. I enjoyed listening to Cecilia's practical recommendations around the challenges facing health practices, in particular when wanting to become an employer of choice. Putting together your value proposition, focusing on the 3 C's: culture, compensation, and career development. You can find Cecilia's contact details in the show notes. To receive a PDF summary of this episode, head to the link in the show notes or go to our website, healthpracticeinsights.com.au. You can also sign up to our newsletter so you never miss an episode. In the next episode, my guest is Health Practice CEO Richard Pearce. We'll be looking at the key areas health practices can focus on when looking to reduce costs and create efficiencies. Please follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Health Practice Insights is brought to you by C2M Consulting, marketing advisors to the health sector. I'm Wallace Long. Thanks for listening.